Do you want to start doing Rev Slayer? Revenant Slayer, or Zombie Slayer, is probably the first Slayer that you encounter in Hypixel Skyblock. While in the late game, Revenant Horror Slayer is actually pretty easy, but early game it could be quite difficult, especially if you don't know what items you need and what gear is good for Revenant Slayer. Lucky for you guys, I am both Zombie Slayer 9, which is the max, and I've also dropped my own Warden Heart, which is the main RNG drop for Revenant Tier 5. I've killed close to 600 Tier 5 Revenants, so I think I kinda know how to kill them. I hope. When it comes to Revenant Slayer, Tiers 1 to 4 are fairly easy and they are all the same pretty much. As you can see, as you go higher, the damage and health increases. This, however, is not a problem as they are fairly linear in terms of difficulty between the boss levels. Revenant Tier 5 is where it gets very difficult though. This is like end game, mid-late game type of boss right here. That being said, Revenant Horror Tier 1 to 4 can probably be grouped together for ease of access. Basically, if you want to grind out to Zombie Slayer 9, there's no point grinding tiers 1 to 3, you should just start at 4. Very quickly though, in case you are here for tiers 1 to 3, I will go over the gear and useful tips and bits of information. Starting off with the most simple thing is how to get to Maddox from the portal. It's just back here, past the fountain, through here, and then down. From here, you can start all your Slayer quests until you unlock the Maddox Bat Phone. Eventually, when you reach Wolf Slayer 3, which is a different Slayer, you can unlock the Maddox Bat Phone, which I would recommend highly before moving on to Rev 4 and 5. This makes it easy so that if you haven't unlocked Auto Slayer, which I'll go over in a bit, you can access Maddox's menu from anywhere in the Hypixel world. Speaking of Auto Slayer, to unlock Auto Slayer, you need level 6 for the first 3 Slayer types. That means you need Revenant Horror 6, Tarantula Broodfather 6, and Sven Packmaster 6 to unlock Auto Slayer. Auto Slayer makes the grind to Zombie Slayer 9 incredibly easy, as you don't need to open the Maddox menu every single time you kill the Slayer to start the next one. I would definitely recommend getting Auto Slayer before attempting to grind out Tier 5 Revenant Horrors, as it just makes your life so much easier. Now, for Tiers 1 to 4, I'm about to go over all the gear, but this is mainly more directed to Tier 4, as that's the first worthwhile Revenant Slayer to be grinding. Revenant Horror Tier 4 gives you 500 XP or 625 with the Aatrox buff. Now, for Revenant Tier 4, Shadow Assassin armor with a Reaper fashion will literally be your best bet. That is literally like the ideal, cheap setup to kill Rev 4s easily. For cheap pets, I would definitely recommend either a zombie or a ghoul pet for Zombie Slayer. The zombie pet increases defense and damage against zombies. The ghoul pet increases XP from killing zombies, which makes it easier to spawn your bosses in. If Shadow Assassin armor is too expensive or you are attempting a lower boss, Ender armor or Undead armor is actually a very good choice. The cheapest pet I'd recommend for Zombie Slayer would be a Griffin pet as well. A couple budget options for weapons for lower tiers of Rev Slayer could be the Aspect of the End, Revenant Falchion, Raider Axe, Aspect of the Dragons, and stuff like that. On pets, I would definitely recommend putting a Dwarf Turtle Shelbin. That's because, especially when you get to Rev 5, they deal lots of knockback, which is super annoying because then you won't be able to hit your boss. If somehow you were struggling to survive from tiers 1 to 4, I would definitely recommend helmets like the Reaper Mask. However, Reaper Mask is about 15 mil last time I checked, so Crystallized Heart or any other helmets that give Vitality or Mending would definitely help you. If you have a look here, the Crystallized Heart doubles your Mending and Vitality, which basically doubles your healing. I would recommend, if you're struggling to survive and can't afford a Reaper Mask, to put Last Stand on your armor. This increases your defense as your health is lowered, making it easier to survive. Also, if you're struggling with healing, I would definitely recommend the Wand of Healing and its upgrades, which are unlocked as you progress through Zombie Slayer. You could also try changing your pet to a Blue Whale or a Baby Yeti. Anything with more health and defense would help you survive bosses easier. That being said, Blue Whale and Baby Yeti are much more expensive than a legendary zombie pet. In addition to using Lifesteal or Siphon, you should definitely try and focus on using a Zombie Slayer based weapon. This is because that they give extra combat XP when you hold them, and you deal more damage to zombies when you hold them, and you take less damage from zombies when you hold them. If you're a high enough Sven Packmaster level, you could also try getting a Mana Flux or Overflux. These give you small stat increases and can sometimes be just enough for you to survive. Now, to practice what I've been saying, I just went and grabbed literally the cheapest stuff I could find out of my museum. I've got a full set of Rotten Armor, and I've got a Gentle Earth Shot. Obviously, I do have the best healing wand, but I will only be using that, and I will not be using my Overflux Power Orb. Okay, so this is literally taking ages, but here we go. We've got this Rev 4 up, 1.5 million health, and I've literally picked out maybe like 200k worth of gear out of my museum to try and kill this. Obviously, I've got a higher magical power and a decent pet on, and I've got the best healing wand. However, if you were trying to do a Rev 4, you will be definitely using more expensive gear than what I am. Which, I mean, I guess it kind of balances out, because you'll be dealing more damage. As you can see, the strat for Revenant 4 is you just need to hit him and keep walking back. You need to keep walking back, otherwise they kind of like combo you and you take heaps of damage. There we go. Rev 4, using just a rotten set of armor and this Earth Shard here, which, I mean, this whole set comes out to like 150k, even less if you use auction instead of bin. So what I aim to do with that is show that Revenant 4 is not that difficult, which means Revenant 1 to 3 is also pretty easy. Moving on to Tier 5, this is where things get spicy. What makes Tier 5 so much harder than Tier 4? Well, one thing that I found between Tier 5 and Tier 4 is Tier 5 is a huge jump in terms of damage and health. Now, you might be thinking, well, I mean, they all kind of jump up in health and damage, but Tier 5 regenerates health like crazy, so you need to be able to deal enough damage to outpace his healing. Additionally, as you can see, Revenant Tier 5 has an extra stat, that is Thermonuclear. This ability will literally one-tap you if you do not dodge it. This makes Tier 5 much more difficult than Tier 4, which is why usually Tiers 1 to 4 get skipped over in guides like this. Now, I'm going to start with Armor. For Tier 5, you could definitely do it with Shadow Assassin, but you literally need to be super skilled, and I've heard of people doing it in Shadow Assassin. Me personally, I was not able to kill Tier 5s in Shadow Assassin. For me, in Shadow Assassin, the defense was just not that good. I would definitely recommend Necron's Armor or Crimson Armor. Obviously, if you already have one of these armor sets laying around, use them. Now, the pros and cons for Necron and Crimson Armor is that early on, Necron Armor is cheaper and it's fairly good. You can definitely do Tier 5 in them. However, if you want to long game this, you want to like kill these revs super quick, I would definitely recommend getting Crimson Armor and upgrading it a bit, as the Crimson Swipe ability helps loads with Tier 5 Revenants. Finally, if you have the money to spare, you could get the Reaper set, which is specifically for Revenant Slayers. It gives extra buffs against zombies specifically, however, after doing Revenant Slayers, you won't be able to use it for much else. That's why I recommend getting Necron or Crimson if you don't already have them. Now for helmets, if you are struggling with survivability, a Reaper mask will definitely be your go-to. It increases your healing and it's got loads of good stats for survivability. Weapons wise, I would recommend anything with the highest DPS that you have. I would say the lowest you could go would be a Livid Dagger with OFA or something like that if you really needed to scrape in and you were on a budget. However, I would definitely recommend something like a Giant Sword or an Axe of the Shredded. If you want to get the most out of your DPS against Revenant Slayer zombies, then definitely get the Axe of the Shredded. However, if you want a weapon that you can maybe use in dungeons or somewhere else, then get a Giant Sword. I will say, however, the Axe of the Shredded has great abilities when it comes to defeating Revenant Tier 5. Now for items, I would definitely recommend getting the best healing wand, that is this one here, Wand of Atonement. If healing is an issue, you can also use a Florid Zombie Sword, however, I've never used one of those. I would definitely recommend getting a Mana Flux or an Overflux Power Orb for tier 5. The small stat boost and mana boost that this gives you, it goes a lot further than you'd think. Now for tier 5, I would still recommend using a zombie or a ghoul pet. However, if you have the coins, then you can get something crazy like, I don't know, like a golden dragon or something. You know, if you really wanted to go all out, you could. Speaking of going all out, if you have the requirement and you have the coins, a Warden Helmet helps loads with DPS. The Warden Helmet is also probably the most versatile helmet outside of dungeons for Hypixel Skyblock. When actually killing a tier 5 rev, it's not as simple as it used to be, because there used to be a glitch where you could just hide under some rails and pretty much like just glitch him out and kill him really easily. However, I don't think that that's in the game anymore, so the strat when killing these is to keep moving back and try and stay out of this blast radius. You want to keep hitting him, and you want to outpace his healing. If you have a look, if I don't hit him for a while, his health will regenerate pretty quickly. Let's have a look. 5.8, 5.9, 6 mil. See? Yeah. And it increases, like, exponentially. So, the main thing is you want to keep hitting him, otherwise, there you go, look. He's already back at full health. Let's get him down to half health, just so I can show you guys his thermonuclear ability. As you can see, he will charge up this bedrock like circle and lots of lightning will strike around him. When that happens, if you were standing in that radius, you will die instantly. There's nothing about it, you will die. What that means is you need to be very careful not to get caught in that ability. That is about as much as you need to know for Revenants. They aren't very difficult to kill. However, if you have no idea what to do, then they can be very difficult to pick up. I'm just going to go over some tips that I used when I did this. Number 1 is if you warp hub. Now, I believe you need to be, you have to have a rank to do this. But obviously, killing zombies in the crypts, if you're in a public lobby, there can be lots of players. So if you go to the hub selector and you right click random hub, it usually puts you in a lobby by yourself. Now this is huge because you don't have to share the crypts with anybody else. Another thing I could recommend is if you have auto pet rules, you can definitely use it to your advantage. What I mean by this is you can make it so that as you're killing zombies, you have something, let's say like a ghoul pet, that gives you extra XP. And then when the rev spawns in, it can switch to a damage pet, you know, like your zombie or your like a tiger pet or something like that. This can increase your rates pretty quickly as well. The other thing I could recommend is maybe if you aren't using a weapon that gives you extra XP against zombies, when you're spawning in your slayers, you should definitely use a bow. That's all for this video. If you guys have any questions, leave them in the comments below and I'll respond to them. If you enjoyed the video and you found it informative, please consider liking and subbing.